the 21st day of September 2022. I am troubled this morning. The lead story, the only story, is that Vladimir Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine and said he is not bluffing. Let me go immediately to that news. Wall Street Journal. In a major escalation of the war in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin raised the threat of a nuclear response in conflict in Ukraine, ordered reservists to mobilize as Moscow seeks to buttress his army's flagging manpower and regain the offensive following stinging losses on the battlefield. Russia will use all the instruments at its disposal to counter a threat against its territorial integrity. This is not a bluff. That's a quote. This is not a bluff. Mr. Putin said in a national address that he blamed the West for the conflict in Ukraine. He said troops were facing the best of Western troops and weapons. The speech is the clearest sign yet that 7 months into the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, Russia is unable to counter Ukraine in the West, which has largely united behind Kyiv in the face of the Russian invasion. Without providing evidence, Mr. Putin said top officials of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization have said it would be acceptable to carry out nuclear strikes on Russia. He also blamed Ukraine for strikes against the nuclear power plant in one of their regions, which has been occupied by Russian troops since near the start of the war. To those who allow themselves such statements, I would like to remind them, Russia also has many types of weapons of destruction, the components of which are in some cases more modern than those of the countries of NATO, said Mr. Putin in his speech. Mr. Putin cast the partial mobilization as a response to what he called a decades-long Western plot to break up Russia. He repeated false accusations that the West had stirred rebellion inside the country's borders, armed terrorist rebels in the Muslim-dominated South, arranged a coup in Ukraine in 2014 and transformed Ukraine into an anti-Russian bridgehead, turning the Ukrainians themselves into cannon fodder. Following the speech, the United States dollar rose to a 28-year high, and European stocks declined. And on the PBS NewsHour, Turkey's President Erdogan sort of rejoined NATO with this declaration of his intentions to the end of the war. Cut number 24, please.
Since 2014, we have been talking to my dear friend Putin about this, and this is what we have requested from him. We asked him to return Crimea to its rightful owners. These are our descendants at the same time, the people who are living there. If you were to take this step forward, if you could leave us, you would also be relieving the Crimean Tatars and Ukraine as well. That's what we have always been saying. But since then, unfortunately, no step has been taken forward.
Now, when Erdogan says that, my dear friend Putin, he's trying to signal what Modi of India and Xi of China signaled. Look, we get along well with you, but you're not in our clubhouse anymore. Putin is now isolated and threatening to use nuclear weapons. I'd like your phone call reactions, 1-800-520-1234. There really is no other story. I've got lots of other stories. The special master said this. The Trump people have to put up or shut up on the declassification defense. There's a lot of news that ordinarily, the Cleveland Indians beat the White Sox last night 11-7 in 11 innings, 10-7 in 11 innings, and their magic number is down to 9. They have the tiebreaker with the White Sox, so they can't manage this. So there's lots of news I would do on a normal happy day, but it's not every day that you wake up and see one of the world's most tyrannical, vicious people who happens to have thousands of nuclear weapons threaten to use them. Indeed, I've been doing this show for 23 years, and there's never been a threat like that in 23 years. And I'm sure Democratic strategists are thinking, it's 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis was good for political gains, but Biden isn't, Blinken isn't, General Austin isn't. That's a big deal. Jake Sullivan is up burning the midnight candle. That's a big deal. They're getting reports on, is there any mobilization of Russia's arsenal? Is there any kind of indication that it's a tactical nuke intended to destroy Kharkiv? 1-800-520-1234. I had been ready to do a story on chess this morning because there's a chess scandal involving Hans Niemann, who he's a 19-year-old, Bobby Fischer. He's the next Bobby Fischer, and he's tearing up the international chess circuit. And a fellow named Carlsen got mad after one move and left. I think that's just kind of interesting because chess is interesting every 40 years. The other stories, Times of Israel reporting that mean global sea levels could rise by a half meter, 1.6 feet by 2050, 2 meters by 2100, and 5 meters, 16 feet by 2150 if global emissions continue to rise. All right. Normally, I kick that around and say, are you really worried? Is anyone buying anything on the Outer Banks, 16 feet sea levels? That's a lot of sea level. That's under Manhattan. But that's not immediate. Republican attorney generals of 24 states are warning Visa, MasterCard, American Express to stop identifying which purchases are from gun shops. That's a takedown of ESG. In Minneapolis, remember, Minneapolis is in Minnesota. Minnesota has a Democratic governor, Tim Walz, and a Democratic Attorney General, Keith Ellison. And the Justice Department said they had charged 47 people with running a brazen fraud that stole $240 million from the government for meals for impoverished people that they did not provide. It is a state-administered program. So, Minnesotans, your government, run by Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, did not detect a $240 million fraud scheme. $240 million. All right, to the phone. Jerry in Virginia, what do you think?
Good morning, Hugh. I think this threat of the use of nuclear weapons, whether it's tactical nukes or full-scale nukes, would trigger a full NATO intervention, and I think that's what we need to signal. In fact, I think Admiral Stavridis has hinted at that in some of his writings, but not only that it would be a full-scale intervention on land, but the isolation of Russia, both in the Black Sea and in the Baltic. I think that he needs to be prepared for a multinational response, and that's what we need to be signaling to him.
This is, by the way, Captain Jerry Hendricks. He didn't tell me that. The author of To Protect and Defend, and the critical quick read on U.S. strategy on the water. So, Jerry Hendricks, what would NATO do right away, in your view? I mean, I've never heard. Have you? Am I right? No one's ever made this kind of a threat before?
Well, I think he's hinted at this. He's been talking about escalate to de-escalate for the better part of 10 years now as a means of trying to signal to us that he would use tactical nukes in order to force us to stand down. But I think what, in fact, it would do is, instantaneously we would have a no-fly zone. Fourth and fifth generation NATO aircraft would be over Ukraine, making sure that Russia is not, and that we would see the introduction of NATO land forces. Certainly the Poles would be there instantly, and then we would have to follow in behind, and we began pre-positioning troops over the last 6 months to do just that. So I think if he escalates, we would be on the ground in Ukraine.
And what would happen to their Black Sea fleet? I mean, a nuclear weapon is a different thing.
Yes, it is. It is. It's a dramatic increase. And so I think their Black Sea fleet, if it was at sea, it would be sunk. And otherwise, it would be locked in port. It would not be getting out of its ports. And quite frankly, so would its Baltic Sea. If NATO becomes engaged, Russia loses the Baltic and the Black, and it will be isolated geographically.
But I don't see this administration doing anything except wringing their hands publicly. And I don't expect you to comment on that. You're a professional. But I just don't see them doing anything that would signal that.
Yes.
All right, Captain, thank you. Let me get some more shocked responses. John in Michigan. What do you think of Putin, John?
Hi, Hugh. I'm not surprised by this. In fact, I fully expected this. With the wimp we have in the White House and the weak military leadership that we've seen recently in Afghanistan, with Putin posing himself with China right now, I mean, I saw this coming. I don't know how they couldn't see it coming.
Weakness is provocative, Ronald Reagan, and boy, it has provoked Putin now to threaten the use of nuclear weapons, waking up to the worst saber rattling of my lifetime. I'll be right back. Morning, Glory, America, Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm joined by Tom Weiler. Tom is an old friend of mine. He's also a Navy submariner, retired now, who is running for Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District. He's a perfect guest this morning as I talk about Putin's threat against us last night. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. It's a pleasure to be on with you this morning and to be able to talk to you and your listeners.
Let's tell people first where the 3rd District is in Minnesota, who you are running against, and how the race stands.
Well, the 3rd District in Minnesota is the western suburbs, basically, of Minneapolis. I'm running against Congressman Dean Phillips, a self-proclaimed moderate who's voted 100% of the time with President Biden and Speaker Pelosi in their failed agenda. And it's a suburban district that actually was Republican for about 50 straight years until 4 years ago. Congressman Phillips pulled one out of the hat and brought it over to the Democratic side. But it's a district that I think is ready for the Republicans to take back. It's a business-centric district with a line of sort of pragmatic, independent voters at its core, along with that conservative base. And the two issues that are really impacting, obviously, all Minnesotans and all Americans, inflation and crime. The 40% of those in the district who identify as independent definitely believe that conservative principles are the way to attack those two issues affecting all Americans. So I think we're in great shape this November 8th to get a victory up there in Minnesota's 3rd District and bring conservative Midwestern values to D.C. to represent the great folks in Minnesota.
Now, I want to spell out the website, weilerforcongress.com, WEILERFOR Congress.com. There might be a submariner who's a Steelers fan and will not be able to get that, so I'm going to do it again. Weilerforcongress.com, WEILERFOR, WeilerforCongress.com. Is the district a D+5, a D+2? What is it, Tom Weiler?
I think it's a D+6, I think is the latest I saw. And I was just at an event actually last night with Congressman Emmer, and he has been very supportive, of course, the chairman of the NRCC, and he was explaining, that anything from an D+8, I think, is basically even ground at this point coming up to this election because of the momentum that Republicans have across the voting spectrum, but specifically on independent voters. And just the failed policies of the Biden agenda, specifically crime, inflation, and the border, are turning a lot of moderate independent voters back to the Republican side.
I just mispronounced your name again, Tom Weiler, and we were neighbors for a while, so I shouldn't do that. But that's just what I do on the radio. Tom, people need to know story. You are a submariner. Would you tell people your service? Because I got to talk to you about Putin's threat last night. Because all of a sudden, every submariner under the water all over the world's on alert.
Yes, sir. And real quick, if people want to vote for Wheeler or Weiler, I'll take votes for both. but yes, Hugh, I was a submariner for 20 years. All things equal, I thought I'd still be driving submarines, in the South China Sea or the Mediterranean, but I got a medical curveball with Parkinson's a few years back. But no, the submarine community is definitely, it's a different world this morning than it was last night. And that's unfortunate, but sort of a series of unforced errors here, I think, by the Biden administration has contributed to where we are with the crises in Ukraine. Clearly, Mr. Putin is ultimately responsible for the tragedy occurring right there, the current war, and we do need smart, pragmatic, common sense leadership to bring this crisis to a resolution and stop the bloodshed.
Tom, will you remind people, were you attack submarines or boomers?
I was on 3 fast attack submarines, all based out of Pearl Harbor, and then I was the executive officer on USS Michigan, which is an SSGN, so that's a former boomer converted into a steel delivery platform and a TLAM shooter, tactical land attack missile shooter. So I have a lot of operational experiences out in the Western Pacific and Indian Oceans.
So we don't know how many submarines we've got in the Black Sea or the Mediterranean right now, but they would be engaged immediately. What do you think happens if Putin follows through on this, Tom? I don't think I'm 66. I don't remember Nikita Khrushchev in 1962. That's the last Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't remember anyone making a nuclear threat like this. Do you?
No, not at all. And like I said, it's a different world. And the biggest thing we have to do now is just make sure the United States is using every resource, every card in the deck to prevent any type of nuclear exchange. Clearly, including a tactical nuke by President Putin. I think we need to make it clear to him that any use of nuclear weapons is completely unacceptable, and we need to ramp up our isolation of Russia and our diplomatic and economic isolation, including if China wants to continue to buy natural gas and oil, and Europe. The resources that come into Putin and Russia on those sales, they need to be cut off if we really want to start, pushing back on Putin's aggression here. So I think we need to ramp those things up, and those are going to have drastic consequences to our economy. But those consequences fail to compare to the tragedy that would occur if there was any exchange of nuclear weapons.
Now, Tom Weiler is who I'm talking to. He's running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District, longtime naval officer, submariner. And he needs your help at Tom Weiler for, I want to make sure I get the website right. It is weilerforcongress.com, WEILERFOR Congress.com. I'm sure you're being outraged. Are you getting the resources you need, Tom?
Yes, we are getting outraged, and unfortunately for me, Congressman Dean Phillips has a pot of family money to the tune of about $120 million. So we're fighting an uphill battle on the financial front. But with that said, we're getting a good surge in fundraising right now because it's clear in our recent polling that this race is right there for the taking. So, the more money we have to get our message out, we're really confident that if we can get our message out about our story, our policies, our principles, and the biggest thing is contrast that to Congressman Dean Phillips and his 100% voting record with the Biden agenda, and he says the word moderate, but bottom line, he doesn't vote moderate at all. He's voted against law enforcement, voted to effectively defund the police, and voted for over $4 trillion worth of spending that has, helped spur inflation. So we think if we get our message out, the great folks in Minnesota's 3rd District, who are smart, pragmatic voters, are gonna join our team to turn the ship around in our district and in the country.
Now, Tom, I'm on AM 1280, The Answer in the Patriot in the Twin Cities, so people can listen to me every day. They can also help you walk a precinct. They can help you get out the vote early. Minnesota actually starts voting a week from Friday. What are you doing about the early voting?
Yeah, and actually, it's if I'm getting my days right, in 2 days, the 23rd of September, actually. So,
oh my gosh, I thought it was next Friday. Okay.
No. Unfortunately, in Minnesota, voting season's just about as long as our high school football season. But
wow.
But we are. With that said, we're engaging with as many folks as we can right now to make sure people are informed voters. The Star Tribune did run at least candidate sort of profiles in the Star Trib this morning. Unfortunately, Congressman Dean Phillips is following the Biden tradition of hiding in the basement when it comes to debates. We did have one debate scheduled for the state fair, and he pulled out of that. So we do have up to 3 debates scheduled with Congressman Phillips, and we're hoping to get those scheduled sooner rather than later, just so the great Minnesotans in the 3rd understand the 2 options here, understand there's 2 different paths forward, and really, the significant differences in policies, principles, and experience and leadership between myself and Congressman Phillips.
It couldn't be bigger. It couldn't be bigger. But I do want the whole national audience to understand, if you're given $10, $25, $50, $100 to a congressional candidate, go for a race that if we win, it's doable. I think anything that's actually D plus 10 is doable. You're only D plus 6. It's very doable because Tom is a wonderful candidate. His wife and kids are wonderful people. They love to campaign. I see him whenever I come to Minnesota, and it's a lot of fun, Tom. You're doing a good job as a first-time candidate. How do you feel about it?
We're very optimistic. In fact, my 5 and 7-year-old, we taped our first commercial last week, so they were loving life. They got to even miss school for a half a day. And yeah, my whole family and my parents, brothers, sisters, sort of the whole Weiler group back in Minnesota is all fully engaged, and we're enjoying it. And honestly, just talking to the folks in Minnesota's 3rd District, and I do feel they feel inspired by our message and excited about the future of America, because our big message is, to turn the ship around in Minnesota. It's not to abandon ship. The ship's not taking on water. The American dream doesn't need to be redefined. We just need to turn the direction we're going and ensure that the American dream is protected for generations to come.
Weiler for Congress. It's the lead tweet at HughHewitt.com right now. If you just go over to my Twitter thing, you can find it and help out Tom, because we need another submariner in the Congress. I don't even know if we have any submariners in the Congress. 5 seconds, Tom. Do we have any other submariners in the Congress?
Not that I'm aware of, so I'm looking to represent the submarine community in Congress.
That we need one. We need many. I told Leader McCarthy he needs to have half of his caucus be veterans of the Long War. He's getting there. Tom Weiler will be another step forward. Thank you, Tom. Don't go. He needs a very competent replacement for him, and they're going to get one in Attorney General Eric Schmidt, who joins me this morning, nominated by the Republicans last month. Good morning, General. Great to have you back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good to be with you again, Hugh.
How goes the campaign? I just tweeted out the campaign website and not only your personal but the campaign Twitter account. How goes it? I don't even know the name of the Democrat. I feel like you're in great shape. I don't know who you're running against.
Well, I guess that's a good thing. But
that's a good thing. Don't say his or her name. It doesn't matter.
We're not taking anything for granted. I mean, it's a real contrast, honestly, in background and in policy. She's a billionaire heiress, and my dad, I grew up in a working class family. My dad worked 7 days a week in the midnight shift. I actually, in college, gave tours and took out the trash at the property that she grew up on. And so,
my God, you get to run against Cruella DeVille? That's terrific.
Well, she's just completely out of touch. And then she's signed on to all of these crazy, progressive policies that the Biden administration and all this reckless spending, the Green New Deal. I mean, all these things that are making it way more expensive. You pump trillions of dollars into the economy. You declare war on American energy. That's how you get inflation. It's not an act of God. It's not like a hurricane. I mean, there's a formula for it, and the Biden administration's done it, and it's really hurting people who can afford it the least. So we're, on the trail talking about the issues that matter to people. And I think Missourians want somebody who's going to go to Washington and fight on their behalf, and that's what this race is all about.
Now, I want to talk about domestic issues, but I have to raise with you the news of the morning. Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Now, that's not happened in my 66 years because I can't remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Obviously, you're running for Senate. Obviously, you've got law enforcement, judiciary committee background, that kind of stuff. But what's your reaction to a dictator rattling the nuclear saber in a way at a time when America is especially weak? We've cut defense spending. Biden is infirm. We scampered out of Afghanistan. It's just not a good time for the United States to have to stand up to a nuclear bully.
Yeah, obviously, it's very dangerous, and a dangerous dictator. There's no doubt about that. I do think, though, to your point, the world is certainly watching when Biden had the disastrous withdrawal of American forces and billions of dollars worth of equipment lost. I mean, he was just completely incompetent, and we'd be fooling ourselves if people like Putin or China weren't watching that, looking for weakness. I think also the failure to invest in our military is a real problem. And you got China now; they're building islands in the South China Sea. Their Navy, it's a serious issue. So there's a lot for us to take on. And I think this general weakness and incompetence for the Biden administration, not just on foreign policy, but on domestic policy, makes America weaker. And I think we've just got to make sure we feel, America is meant to be this place, this beacon of hope for the world, for freedom and for liberty, but we've got to have peace through strength.
I want to talk a little bit about the politics of Missouri. Did the Republican Party, after a very contentious primary, has it come around and rallied around?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting. It was a 21-person primary,
wow.
The most expensive ever, so it was wild. But we ended up winning by 24 points, which was, more votes than the next three folks combined. And so there was it was a big win. It was a great night and, had the support from people moving forward. There's a lot of momentum. And I think people understand there's no path to the majority. There's no path to 51 if we don't win the Show Me State. And
I
so
agree.
we're going to run really, really hard and make sure we do it, because Hugh, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, on your show the last time. I mean, the stakes couldn't be any higher. I mean, the Democrats, we're not having traditional political debates about like entitlement reform and tax rates. The Democrats are 2 votes away from, essentially adding states to the union, packing the court, federalizing our elections, open borders and amnesty, fundamentally changing this country forever. They are playing for keeps. And so we've got to win these seats. We've got to take the majority back, bring some sanity back to D.C., control the spending, and basically get back to a secure border, lower taxes, fewer regulations, take on the administrative state. I know it's something you talk about a lot. We just got to have courageous leaders who are willing to do it, and I'm up for the challenge.
And we need senators who can actually conduct a cross-examination. I really do believe a lot of the senators don't know how to make a point when the time goes over to them. Okay, General Eric Schmidt is the Attorney General of Missouri. He's going to win handily in the Show Me State because he's going to run through the tape. But talk to me a little bit about your last days as Attorney General. My buddy Dave Yost keeps me informed about what you guys are up to. 24 AGs sued credit card companies yesterday to stop singling out gun companies as a code. I don't know if Missouri is part of that because I don't know if you've got standing or if it's part, whoever gets in on these things. But that greatly bothers me. And the ESG stuff is crazy, Eric Schmidt. What do you as an Attorney General think about it?
Yeah, no, we're a part of the credit card. I mean, again, you see this kind of, woke capitalism that you have to kind of take on the ESG front. It's scary stuff. It started with pensions. It's getting now to credit-worthy businesses where somebody's going to impose their kind of virtue signaling on that front. And we've got the big lawsuit against big tech in the Biden administration. Essentially, we sued the Biden administration for colluding and coordinating with big tech, outsourcing their censorship. We've gotten documents where high-ranking people at Facebook are texting the Surgeon General of the United States saying, hey, we did what you said. What more can we do? They're having censorship meetings. A federal judge just a couple weeks ago said we get to see the emails of senior White House officials now. There's no executive privilege. And so the first time we've got to peek under the hood of this vast censorship enterprise that exists. And it's really not, it's terrible for the Republic. And I think we need people who are willing to stand up and push back.
Yesterday at the Clinton Global Initiative, Bill Clinton said that anyone who opposed ESG is a climate denier. That's simply false. Larry Fink of BlackRock said this, cut number 11 for Attorney General Schmidt. Cut number 11, Jacob. Not playing for us?
Because of the rising energy prices, we are certainly seeing the green premium shrink quite considerably. And so the amount of investment dollars that are going into new decarbonization technology is accelerating, and accelerating very rapidly.
He's talking about making everyone go green through his ESG, Eric. It is fundamentally a tax on working Americans.
Absolutely. It makes everything more expensive. And I think as more people become aware of this ESG movement, it's radical. And you look and see what happened in California. We're suing California for their emission standard. They want to because it affects the entire country. They want to basically not be able to sell, buy gas-powered vehicles in just a few years. No one's prepared for that. But yet now they're telling people, well, wait on charging your electric vehicles because we don't have enough energy. I mean, this is suicide. I mean, you see countries around the world in China, they're building coal-powered plants every month. We have all the energy we'll ever need here in the United States, and we ought to make sure we're doing that. All the options should be on the table because it hurts working families the most. But again, the Democrat Party at this point, Hugh, is a party of, by, and for the elites. And this is just the newest iteration of that.
Now, they are hoping that the Dobbs decision will energize their base. I always tell people their base always comes out anyway. What it has done is energize the Republican base and also made Democrats answer the question, what about 8th and 9th month abortions? Now, media doesn't usually ask that. I'm wondering if your opponent has been asked that. Is she a radical on abortion?
Yeah, absolutely. Abortion on demand, taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. I mean, that position is really radical. And I think that, Missouri is a pro-life state, and I think we'll vote accordingly. The issues people are talking about there, that is obviously an issue. But these kitchen table issues, when gas is up the way it's been, and even though it's come down slightly, it's still markedly more expensive than it was a year ago. But the grocery bills are expensive. The utility costs. Winter is coming here, Hugh, right? I think the utility costs are going to be sky high because, again, we've declared war on American energy. So natural gas prices are up. It's going to hurt working families the most. And the Democrats can't run from that record because they own it.
There are 5 issues that I always talk to people. The Democrats want to talk about abortion and Donald Trump. Republicans want to talk about inflation, crime, the border, education, and China. So let's go through those. Inflation is a choice. We chose inflation, Eric Schmidt. What will you do to turn it around?
We need to have all options on the table as far as domestic energy. So we need to control spending. We ought to have a balanced budget amendment, by the way. We were only one vote away from that in the 90s. Republicans ought to, I think, get their sea legs back on controlling out-of-control spending. And so that's one piece. But also, when you choke supply, this is what happens. And so let's open it up. Let's be energy dominant again. Let's export energy to our friends and allies across the world. That's what we ought to be doing. That will bring prices down because it's not just the price at the pump. It's everything in the transportation system that gets more expensive, and we're seeing that.
When my friend Tim Garrison was the U.S. Attorney in Missouri, he told me about various initiatives that Missouri was undertaking. I know from him that you're a law and order guy. Has crime spiked in Missouri the way it has in, say, Chicago and Philadelphia, and we just don't know about it?
Yeah, you've seen it in St. Louis and Kansas City. You've got Soros-funded prosecutors. And now, the dangerous thing here is you've got police officers who are, retiring early. They're not respected by, the mayor of St. Louis and Kansas City, by the prosecutors in St. Louis and Kansas City. And so it's a real challenge. Now, one of the things we did with Tim Garrison and then the U.S. Attorney under the Trump administration, Jeff Jensen, in the St. Louis area, we started the Safer Streets Initiative, where we have lawyers from our office embedded in those offices to prosecute violent crime like carjacking. Very effective. And so I think it's, we need to be the party of safety. And I don't care who you are, what zip code you live in. People want to be safe. They deserve it. But, these radical policies by these Democrats have really hurt them in the cities and hurting their constituents.
Now, Republicans say every state is a border state, meaning that the border issue matters everywhere. Missouri's in the heart of the country. Does it matter to Missouri?
Absolutely. I've been saying that for a while because, the fentanyl that's coming across, the human trafficking that's coming across, the crime that's coming across doesn't just stop in El Paso. It doesn't just stop in McAllen, Texas. It ends up in Farmington, Missouri, in St. Louis, and in Kirksville. I mean, it's a real problem, and that's why, I've been out in front. We were the first state to file on the Remain in Mexico policy. We took that to court and won. We were the first state to file on Title 42, keeping that in place. That accounts for about 50% of all the expulsions right now. So, Hugh, if you think it's bad, just double it. And that's what that lawsuit was all about. So it's affecting every state in the country. And the Democrats want to ignore it, of course, until, Martha's Vineyard finds out what it's like to have people there illegally. And, they can have all the signs they want about kindness is everything, but I think they showed their true colors in hypocrisy last week.
Last question has to do with education. Tim Scott, your future colleague in the United States Senate, says the GOP has to be the party of parents. Do you agree with that, Eric Schmidt?
I do. And one of the things in Missouri, we stood up for parents. I sued 47 school districts in Missouri that were forcing the masking of 5-year-olds. The parents right now, the moms, are our biggest volunteer force in this campaign because they were so glad somebody stood up for them. And we were also issued subpoenas to school districts that were hiding documents about critical race theory, it's divisive policy. We've uncovered things like the gender unicorn and the oppression matrix, kids being forced to participate in privileged walks. I mean, this isn't just in New York and California. It's everywhere. And again, you have to have the courage to fight back on behalf of parents and for kids. That's my record, and we certainly need to do that in the Senate.
Eric Schmidt, great to talk to you. Attorney General Eric Schmidt of Missouri, soon to be Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, coming to Washington, D.C.